Love's Triumph, Journey of Understanding and Reconciliation. Serenity knew her in-laws were wonderful people, but she could tell her mother-in-law wasn't happy with her. Serenity worried whether she would suffer the same challenges her aunt had in her teenage years as she spent more time with her in-laws, even though there was no explicit disagreement yet. She really craved their sincere acknowledgement. As the conversation with Zachary grew unproductive, Serenity chose to suppress her anger rather than quarrel with him. Realizing it was futile to convince him of her desires as he seemed unable to understand her perspective. Continuing the discussion would only lead to arguments and further strain their relationship. Her intention was to resolve issues, not escalate tensions. When Serenity attempted to leave, Zachary held her arm firmly, expressing his refusal to sign any contract as they were already married. He urged her not to go back to her sister's place that night, pleading for her to stay under the same roof to provide a sense of security, even if they did not share a bed. Serenity was determined to leave, feeling that staying would not resolve their differences. Despite their differing views, Zachary refrained from losing his temper to avoid hurting Serenity again. He expressed remorse for his impulsive actions in the past and promised not to repeat them. Serenity still insisted on going back to her sister's place, not wanting to risk angering him further. Silently, they descended the stairs together, and Zachary decided to drive her back. Serenity didn't protest to avoid upsetting him. In the car, she reflected on her naivety in assuming Zachary was a simple salaryman due to the ordinary car he drove. She later discovered that he used the ordinary car to conceal his identity from her, similar to how other members of his family drove unassuming vehicles when they appeared before her. As Zachary drove slowly, he hoped to make the most of the time spent with Serenity. The air between them remained laden with unspoken thoughts and emotions as they both grappled with their differences and uncertainties about the future. Despite driving slowly, the car soon arrived at Liberty's place. Liberty had chosen an apartment nearby Brynfield to stay close to her sister. Zachary parked the car, announcing their arrival, and Serenity bid him farewell as she got out of the car. "I'll take you upstairs," Zachary offered. "No need. You go back. Drive safe and get some rest at home tomorrow." "You don't look too well," Serenity replied, avoiding eye contact with him. Zachary's gaze intensified and asked in a soft voice, "Seren, do you still care about me?" Ignoring his attempt to hold her hand, Serenity walked into the building without responding to his question. Zachary stood at the entrance, watching her until she disappeared from sight. He resisted the urge to follow her to the door, maintaining his pride despite having bowed to her multiple times with no acknowledgement from her. After some time, Zachary decided to leave. He called his friends Josh and Duncan and suggested they meet at Neon Nights for a drink. Upon arriving at the bar, he found Josh and Duncan waiting for him in a private room, with beers already ordered. Seeing the beers, Zachary teased, "Can't afford anything stronger, or do they not serve good drinks here? Tonight, we're not leaving sober." Josh, however, declined to drink as he needed to remain sober to accompany Jasmine to her aunt's house for dinner the next day. He shared that Jasmine's mother had arranged a blind date for her with an executive from Low Enterprise, and the dinner was merely a front for the date. Josh was determined to make it known that he was interested in Jasmine to put an end to the blind dates arranged by the Sox family. He ordered a few bottles of spirits and began drinking while Duncan accompanied him with a couple of glasses. Duncan encouraged Zachary to share his troubles, suggesting that Josh might be able to offer valuable insights. Instead, Zachary drank in silence, downing one bottle after another until he became visibly upset. Concerned, Duncan tried to stop him from drinking more, but Zachary stubbornly continued. He finally lost control, knocking all the bottles and glasses off the table, causing a loud crash. A waiter came to check on them but quickly retreated upon recognizing Josh and the others. He closed the door, giving them some privacy. After Zachary cleared the table of bottles and glasses, he slumped down and repeatedly mumbled, "Serenity, serenity. It doesn't have to be you." Josh and Duncan struggled to understand his words at first. Curious, Josh leaned in and finally heard Zachary say, "It's not like it has to be you, Serenity." "What's he saying?" Duncan asked, puzzled by Josh's reaction. Josh straightened up, gazing at the drunken Zachary, and explained, "Ever since his sudden marriage, he's been getting drunk several times because of Serenity." At the beginning, Zachary felt downhearted due to Serenity's indifferent attitude towards their agreement. He had even sought solace in alcohol with his friends before, and it was during one of those nights that Jim, acting as a substitute driver, appeared in front of Serenity for the first time. "He's saying it doesn't have to be Serenity." "Ha," Josh chuckled at his intoxicated friend. "Why don't you say that to Serenity's face? What's the point of telling us here? I dare you to say that you don't need her directly to Serenity," Josh added. Zachary rose and shook Josh's shoulders fiercely, shouting, "What more do you want from me, Serenity? I apologized to you, and I let you go back to your sister's place. What else do you want? I'm telling you, as long as I'm willing, there's a whole line of women out there who want to marry me. You're not my only choice." Dizzy from the shaking, Josh retorted, "You're right. If you feel that way, you can just divorce her and marry someone else. In your dreams. I'll never divorce. You're mine. You'll be mine for the rest of your life, and I'm yours. I just want you. I only want you. I won't let go of you. I won't sign a contract. Don't mention the contract to me again. I already burned it and flushed it down the drain. You can only be my wife." After the outburst, Zachary collapsed back onto the couch like a deflated ball. He slumped against the cushions, his eyes closed, but he continued to mutter, "Serenity. Serenity. I'll support you. I can afford to support you. Don't leave me. I need you. You're mine." Zachary's murmuring grew fainter until it ceased altogether. He had fallen asleep. Observing this, Josh and Duncan exchanged a look. Josh commented, "Thank goodness he didn't mistake me for Serenity." Duncan inquired, "Were you afraid he tried to kiss you?" "Terrified that he'd mistake me for Serenity, kiss me, then force himself on me. You don't know how scared I was. Should I play dead or fight back if he forces himself on me?" Josh shared his fears. Duncan was speechless, looking at Zachary, and said, "This isn't the Zachary I know." "Don't say that. You might act the same way when you fall in love and face conflicts with a woman. Maybe you'll be even crazier than him," Josh said, understandingly. "The woman who can make me fall in love isn't in this world yet. I'll just watch as you guys fall in love, get married, and become fathers," Duncan replied, resigned. His friends had all found women they liked, but Duncan hadn't encountered anyone who made his heart skip a beat and made him want to settle down. He believed it was better to stay single. "You're exaggerating. Perhaps the woman who can make your heart flutter is right next to you. Anyway, help me lift this drunkard, and I'll take him home in my car." "Can you manage to take a cab back on your own?" Josh suggested. "Yeah, I'll be fine," Duncan agreed, assisting Josh in picking up the heavily intoxicated Zachary. "He's completely wasted. Leaving him here won't do any good. He might catch a cold lying on the ground all night." I'll take him to Serenity's place. She can take care of him, Josh suggested, wanting to assist his best friend. Duncan cautioned, Zachary is drunk and saying nonsense. If he utters those words in front of Serenity, it'll only make matters worse. Taking Duncan's advice into account, Josh reconsidered, I'll take him to Wildridge Manor then. Agreeing with the new plan, the three of them left the bar. Duncan helped Zachary into Josh's car, exchanged a few words, and watched Josh drive away. Then, Duncan called a cab for himself. During the ride back to York's residence, Zachary intermittently yelled out, switching between declarations of love for Serenity and statements like, "What do I need you for?" It was a battle between his emotions and ego, with his love prevailing one moment and his ego the next. Over an hour later, Josh's car arrived at Wildridge Manor. He had informed Grandma May in advance, and she was waiting for them at the entrance. "Grandma May," Josh greeted. "Apologies for bothering you so late." "No need to apologize. I'm sorry for inconveniencing you to bring Zach back at this hour," Grandma May replied. The bodyguards assisted Zachary out of the car, and upon seeing his intoxicated state, Grandma May inquired, "How much did that brat drink?" "A few bottles. He got so drunk that he started talking nonsense, so I decided not to send him to Serenity. I feared it might upset her further," Josh explained, revealing Zachary's absurd statements. Grandma May snorted, "He'd be a real man if he had the guts to say that to Serenity's face." "Grandma May, Zachary is just feeling down and venting. When he sobers up tomorrow, he'll probably cling to Serenity again like before," Josh defended his friend. In vino veritas. "Look it up," Grandma May replied with a smile. Josh was relieved that he didn't take Zachary to Serenity's place, as Grandma May implied that alcohol often reveals hidden truths. "Do you want to come in for a glass of water before you leave?" Grandma May offered. "No need, Grandma May. I'll head home now. I have plans for tomorrow," Josh declined. Grinning knowingly, Grandma May acknowledged, "All right then, you go back. Good luck with your pursuits." After Josh departed, Grandma May instructed the bodyguards, "Move a deck chair to the swimming pool and let Zach lie there for the night. The cold water will help him sober up." One of the bodyguards objected, but Grandma May's stern expression silenced him. "Follow my instructions. Since he likes to drown his sorrows in alcohol, I'll let him experience it. No matter what he does tomorrow, he won't dare touch you with me around." Zachary was ensnared in a turbulent dream. He fiercely argued with Serenity, declaring, "It's not like I need you, Serenity. I can discard you whenever I want. Don't regret it when that happens." Serenity looked back at him coldly and turned to walk away. "Serenity. You'll never leave me. You're mine. I need you." His instinct drove him to pull her back and keep her from leaving. In the dream's intensity, he tightly held Serenity and tried to kiss her passionately as if trying to brand her as his own. However, as their heated interaction reached its peak, reality intervened. With a loud splash, Zachary flipped over and tumbled out of the deck chair, falling into the pool. The frigid water instantly shocked him awake, shattering the fiery emotions of the dream. "It's freezing. How did I end up in the water?" Zachary cursed, as he tried to comprehend the situation. Swimming to the opposite side of the pool, he climbed out, bewildered and angry. He shouted, demanding an explanation, but there was no one there to respond. It was quiet, and the soft glow of the poolside lights added to the surreal atmosphere. Realizing that he was at the York residence, he understood that only his Nana, Grandma May, would have dared to prank him in this way. Anger subsided, and he sobered up quickly. Picking up the deck chair and the blanket that had fallen into the pool, He threw them in frustration before making his way back into the house with dripping wet clothes. Entering the lounge, he found Grandma May seated on the couch, reading the newspaper. She greeted him with humor. "Oh, what happened? Did our eldest young master go for a swim with Poseidon?" Zachary remained silent, his expression dark. Water continued to drip from his clothes, forming a puddle beneath him. Grandma May playfully teased him about his comments on not needing serenity. As she swung her walking cane, Zachary jumped back to avoid it. "Nana? Stand back. I don't want you peeing on my feet," she responded. "It's not urine, Nana. It's water," Zachary retorted, still wet and exasperated. The scowl on Zachary's face deepened, but he lacked the courage to face another beating from Nana's cane. He dismissed her cynical remark, attempting to cover up his previous outburst. "Nana, I never said Serenity isn't the only girl for me." Deep down, he knew that Serenity was the only one he wanted. He couldn't imagine anyone else by his side. "So you never said that?" Nana questioned. Caught off guard, Zachary hesitated before conceding, "I might have said it in my dreams." "How did you know, Nana?" He had indeed said hurtful things to Serenity during their heated argument, fueled by both rage and intoxication. The alcohol had clouded his judgment and led him down a dangerous path. Panicking, he asked, "What did I do to Serenity while I was drunk? If I did something wrong?" Grandma May interrupted, "How would I know what you did to Serenity? You were rambling after downing so much liquor. I thought you needed help to sober up. Are you clear-headed now?" Zachary fell silent for a moment before confirming, "I'm sober." Realizing the potential consequences, he stopped his thoughts from spiraling further. Alcohol had the power to create chaos. Grandma May reminded him, "Drowning your sorrows won't solve your problems." Zachary shook his head, acknowledging that drinking had only provided temporary relief. "But are your troubles gone now that you're awake? Or do they feel even worse? Remember, when you're drunk, you might act out things you think are just dreams," she warned. His face turned pale as the implications of his drunken actions sank in. Nervously, he inquired about Serenity's well-being. "I don't know," Grandma May admitted, her intimidating tactic successful in prompting concern. Zachary quickly turned to leave, but she stopped him, reminding him of the early hour and the possibility of Serenity's reaction if he woke her up. It was 5 o'clock in the morning, far from an appropriate time for confrontation. "Change out of your wet clothes too. You look like you took a bath with them on," she advised. Despite her words, Zachary seemed set on leaving. "Josh was the one who brought you home last night," Grandma May disclosed, not wanting her grandson to create a scene without being aware. Upon hearing this, Zachary turned back, eager to know if he had done anything to Josh as well. Frustrated, Grandma May gave him a light smack on the arm and scolded, "Who knows what you did to Josh? He left right after dropping you off and didn't even come in." Zachary looked sullen, worried about his own actions while intoxicated. Grandma May teasingly suggested, "Zachary, did you mistake Josh for Serenity in your dream?" "Nana," he hissed, uncomfortable with the thought. "I don't remember a thing." His memory seemed stuck on inviting his friends to neon nights and discussing Serenity's proposal for a new contract. Serenity wanted time to adapt to his status as the York heir, and she wouldn't push herself if it wasn't meant to be. Zachary hoped to handle the situation gently and not force anything. In other words, the couple would divorce if Serenity couldn't fit into Zachary's social circle. Was marriage solely about equal social standing? Zachary and his family had never judged Serenity based on her background. Why should Serenity put pressure on herself and care about others' opinions? Zachary firmly believed there was no gap between them. He believed his word should be enough. "You can pretend nothing happened since you don't remember," Nana remarked. "But there's one thing you kept repeating all night, Serenity, you're not the only one out there for me. Are those your true thoughts? You should go and talk to her when the sun comes out. What's the point of making a fuss about it with us?" Zachary's face fell, and he smiled bitterly. "Seren said a lot to me, Nana. She doesn't want to be a defenseless girl, hiding under my wing. She wants to stand proudly next to me as a woman. Serenity wants us to share common interests, not for me to take care of her financially. She's my wife, and I support her desire. She owns a shop and has her income, shouldn't that be enough? I never asked her to be just a homemaker. I give her freedom, respect, and protection. I'm sure Lisa said something to her to create this misunderstanding." "Your anger revealed your true feelings when you were drunk," Nana pointed out. "Nana, I didn't mean it. It all came out in anger, without thinking. You know how much I care for Serenity. I'm the heir of the York family, I usually get everything I want. But I made a mistake, and I apologized for it. She's still. My ego was bruised, and that's why everything came out wrong," Zachary admitted. Nana intervened, "Don't worry, I won't tell Seren. But you need to figure things out. Do you know what kind of woman Seren is?" Zachary fell silent, realizing he hadn't fully understood Serenity yet. Nana advised him, "Go to her once you truly understand her. Otherwise, your relationship will just go in circles. For now, give her some space." "But why can't I visit my wife? What if someone steals her away?" Zachary protested. "The whole city knows she's Mrs. York. Who would dare cross the line and woo her?" Nana replied. Nana added, "Now, go upstairs, change, and stay put. Let Serenity have some time to herself." Reluctantly, Zachary followed her advice and went upstairs. Meanwhile, Josh arrived at the Sox's residence with a gift in hand. He checked his appearance in the side mirror before approaching the front door. The Sox's watchdogs barked at the noise. Upon seeing Josh, the two hounds stopped barking and wagged their tails in a friendly manner. Josh was a familiar visitor to the Sox's residence, often hanging out with Drake. Unfortunately, Mrs. Sox mistakenly assumed that Josh had a crush on Drake, which led to some amusing situations, but it also helped him become closer to the two hounds. Drake opened the door and jokingly asked, "Are you here for me?" Josh smiled and replied, "You wish. I'm here for your sister." Drake teased him about their mother's misunderstanding, and Josh defended Jasmine, telling Drake not to speak ill of his sister. As they entered the house, Mrs. Sox greeted Josh warmly and graciously accepted the gift he brought. She assured him that his presence was more than enough and that they were happy he came. They had previously worried about their single daughter, thinking she might marry a man, but now they were relieved and pleased that Josh and Jasmine were together. Mr. Sox, who had been more reserved before, now greeted Josh with a friendlier demeanor. They waited for Jasmine to come down. Mrs. Sox mentioned to Josh that Jasmine didn't like men who smoked. Josh confirms that he rarely smoked, keeping it only for occasional social events. Mrs. Sox inquired whether Josh's family knew about his relationship with Jasmine, to which he replied that he planned to tell them once he officially made Jasmine his girlfriend. He feared his family's enthusiasm might overwhelm her, so he wanted to introduce them at the right time. Mrs. Sox expressed her support and high hopes for Josh, even offering a gift and promising an even bigger one once he considered her as his mother. Josh responded with a smile, "I'll work on it and make sure I earn that bigger gift from you soon." Mr. Sox joined the conversation, mentioning that he had heard about Josh's family's ability to pick up on gossip. Josh playfully asked if Mr. Socks was into gossip himself. Mr. Socks replied that gossip wasn't his cup of tea, but he didn't mind hearing some from Josh when they had nothing else to do. Mrs. Socks teased her husband, noting that Jasmine took after him in her love for gossip. She found it amusing how Josh and Jasmine seemed destined to be together. They joked about what embarrassing moments Jasmine's parents might share with Josh when she wasn't around. Meanwhile, Jasmine struggled to choose an outfit. She eventually settled on a dress after standing in front of her wardrobe all day. She grabbed her phone and headed downstairs where Josh was waiting. Drake advised Jasmine to walk like a lady. He advised her sister to put effort into her appearance, considering that an eligible bachelor like Josh was interested in her. He didn't want his sister to end up unmarried and be dependent on him. As they headed out, Jasmine pulled Josh aside and handed him some cash, explaining that it was payment for pretending to be her boyfriend. Josh accepted it with a smile, promising to do a good job. Jasmine jokingly suggested they practice their kiss, but Josh's response surprised her. Josh playfully warned her not to offer money again, as it might lead to different expectations. At the Lowe's dinner, Mrs. Lowe discovered that Josh was courting her niece, Jasmine. She felt happy for Jasmine but also a bit embarrassed, considering the York family's higher social status. After a week of cooling off and focusing on work, Zachary decided to invite Serenity out on a Monday. Her injured hand had healed, and she could now drive. They agreed to meet at the presidential suite on the top floor of Wiltspoon Hotel. Accompanied by Sunny, Serenity arrived at the hotel where Jim and his colleague greeted her respectfully. They guided her to the magnificent suite where Zachary was waiting. The room had a lingering smell of cigarettes, as Zachary had been smoking, which surprised Serenity, who knew he rarely smoked. Sunny broke the silence by calling out to Zachary, and the sight of Serenity and the little boy made Zachary quickly put out his cigarette and remove the ashtray. He didn't want Sunny to be exposed to second-hand smoke. Apologizing for smoking, Zachary offered to quit if Serenity didn't like it. He then invited her to sit down and poured drinks for them. He also gave snacks to Sunny and took a seat next to the boy. After some moments of silence, Zachary handed Serenity a yellow envelope, explaining that it contained something for her. Jokingly, she asked if it was divorce papers, to which Zachary affectionately replied, "Dream on." Curious, Serenity opened the envelope to find papers related to Zachary's assets. He explained that he wanted to give her his assets to relieve her of financial stress, on condition that they wouldn't divorce. He accepted her proposal for an agreement but wanted to remain married. All the paperwork for transferring Zachary's personal assets, including shares in York Corporation, bank accounts, and property deeds, had been organized and packed into one envelope for Serenity. He explained that she would own the company's equity while he would manage York Corporation on her behalf. The profits would be hers to keep, helping her achieve her financial goals. He assured her that he wouldn't keep anything for himself and invited her to decide on an allowance for him. Despite his efforts to show his confidence in her and apologize for his past behavior, Serenity was hesitant to accept the transfer. She didn't want to rely on Zachary or be dependent for everything. She feared becoming comfortable with him and losing her independence in the relationship. Safeguarding her financial independence was important for the long term, as feelings could change over time. Zachary insisted that he wanted to be her lifetime support and offered her access to all his resources. He assured her of his capabilities and the ease of access to his assets. He even suggested picking a new car to replace her damaged one. However, Serenity remained firm in her decision and refused to accept the envelope, leaving Zachary insistent that she take it. Anticipating Serenity's rejection, Zachary resorted to a threat, claiming he would throw the documents out the window if she refused the envelope. He emphasized that her well-being was his priority, and he wanted her to be in charge of their family's assets. Despite hoping that Zachary had changed during their week apart, Serenity realized that he was still the same and couldn't be changed. She decided to work on their problems together. After a prolonged gaze, Serenity picked up the envelope and handed Zachary a black card, suggesting that he keep it as a reflection of his status. She agreed to hold on to the rest of the documents for the time being. Zachary then generously offered to wire money into their joint account for household expenses. He offered to buy a house for Liberty and Sunny. However, Serenity explained that her sister had invested all her money in the restaurant and preferred to wait and save for a house on her own. Serenity also mentioned that Sunny would be starting kindergarten in September, and she had to consider his education expenses. Although she appreciated her sister's support, Liberty wanted to be financially independent and not rely on handouts forever. Serenity explained that she had not considered buying a property yet as she had other financial priorities to address. "Can I take you to see our properties?" Zachary inquired, referring to the houses he purchased before they got married. These properties were mostly villas in sought-after areas with excellent schools nearby. He had bought them in anticipation of having a family in the future and wanting his children to have the freedom to choose their schools. Serenity, aware of his busy schedule, suggested looking at the houses on the weekend when they both had some free time. Zachary was relieved that she was still willing to explore the properties he bought, indicating that she still saw him as her husband and their family was intact in her eyes. Zachary then invited Serenity for lunch, but she declined, wanting to take Sunny back to her sister's place. As they were leaving the presidential suite, Zachary handed Serenity an envelope containing his assets, showing his trust and commitment to her. As they headed downstairs, Zachary inquired about the injury on Serenity's hand, and she assured him it had healed, allowing her to resume her craft work. Despite Zachary's ability to provide a luxurious life, Serenity insisted on making her own money, showing her independence and determination. Zachary reflected on how his mother managed her wealth and never needed to work, coming from a wealthy family background. Zachary had a realization on the difference in their status and backgrounds. His mother, Tanya, came from a wealthy family and managed a successful company, whereas Serenity did not have such privileges and needed to be independent. Serenity's request for independence suddenly made sense to Zachary. Seeing Serenity's smile, Zachary couldn't resist the urge to kiss her, but Sunny's presence in the lift interrupted the moment. They all exited the lift, and Zachary playfully interacted with Sunny, hoping for a child as adorable as him in the future. Zachary's mind wandered to the possibility of Serenity being pregnant, but he couldn't bring up the topic directly. Serenity mentioned she usually went for health checkups during the summer holidays. Zachary was eager for a child but didn't want to pressure Serenity. As they walked together, employees at Woodspoon Hotel observed their CEO following his wife, who was holding a child in her arms, creating an interesting sight. Serenity carefully placed Sunny in his child's seat in the car and turned to face Zachary, who was standing behind her. They exchanged a prolonged gaze before she said, "I have to go." Zachary observed her front bumper and suggested, "You should use another car." From inside the car, Serenity replied, "This is the first car you gave me." Zachary's mood shifted, but he waved as she drove away. His security detail approached, and he returned to the office with them. Meanwhile, Serenity arrived at her sister Liberty's breakfast diner. The renovations were almost complete, and they were preparing for the grand opening. The location seemed promising, with plenty of foot traffic from the nearby schools and offices. As Liberty was wiping tables in the restaurant, she noticed Serenity parking the car. Liberty stopped wiping the table and came out of the restaurant with a cloth in her hand. She smiled as she watched her sister carrying Sunny out of the car. "Mommy," Sunny exclaimed as he ran to Liberty. Laughing, Serenity replied, "I spend a lot of time with him, but he's still closest to his mom." "Of course, he is. You and Zachary should consider having one of your own since you both love children," Liberty teased, trying to gauge her sister's feelings. Serenity smiled but didn't say anything, indicating that the couple had not completely resolved their issues. Curious, Liberty asked, "What did Zachary call you over to talk about?" Entering the restaurant with her son, Serenity replied, "He wanted to discuss something important with me." She then hurried back to the car to retrieve the envelope containing Zachary's assets. Once they were back inside, Serenity inquired about the workers, and Liberty explained that the renovation was completed, and she was inspecting the place for any final alterations. Sitting at a table, Serenity handed the envelope to her sister, explaining, "Zachary gave this to me. I didn't want it, so he compromised and asked me to hold onto it." "Zachary still doesn't fully understand what I really want." Curious, Liberty opened the envelope and found title deeds, car keys, and the transfer of York Corporation's equity. She was astonished by the value of the shares. Liberty's eyes widened. Serenity explained that Zachary was giving her everything as a gesture of love and to provide her with security. However, she felt that he hadn't fully grasped the issues that were driving them apart. Liberty disagreed, pointing out, "You've only known each other as long as you've been married. It's natural that he may not fully understand you yet. Can you confidently say you know him inside out too?" "Give each other some time," Liberty comforted her sister, patting her hand and placing the document back into the envelope. "Don't keep such an important document in my rental house. Although it's a nice neighborhood, we don't know much about our neighbors. Brinfield has better security. You can buy a safe to keep at your home with Zachary. It'll be safer that way. This is everything Zachary owns." Serenity fell silent for a moment before replying, "I'll give Nana a call later. I'll hand the document to her to hold onto. Their home is a better place." "That's a great idea," Liberty agreed. She then asked if Serenity was staying for lunch. "I'm going to the Stones' residence to talk to Aunt Audrey. I might have my lunch there," Serenity replied. Curious, Liberty asked, "What are you going to talk to Aunt Audrey about? Do you need her help with something?" Mrs. Stone was their aunt and held a prominent position in Willspoon. They had never taken advantage of her status. Their relationship was more about finding family rather than seeking any benefits. Serenity explained, "Aunt Audrey mingles with the upper crust. I was thinking she could introduce me to that circle and see how I feel about it. Can I adapt to high society and fit in? Elisa mentioned investing in a project, and I decided to take a gamble. I'll put all my money into the project with Elisa." Divorce was not an option for Serenity, so she wanted to face the challenges head-on and make the most of her situation. Liberty encouraged her, saying, "I see you've made up your mind. Go for it. I support you. You can do it, Seren." Serenity smiled and high-fived her sister, saying, "Let's work hard together." Liberty suggested Serenity hurry to Aunt Audrey's place before she got busy with her social engagements. Serenity agreed and left with Sunny, promising to take him along so he wouldn't bother Liberty. After Serenity departed, Liberty closed the glass door of her restaurant and started jogging. She was determined to keep up her 3 times a day workout routine for her weight loss journey. Even when she was busy, she found ways to exercise, like skipping rope in the restaurant. Liberty strictly followed a diet, avoiding foods high in sugar and fat. She had already lost a considerable amount of weight, going down to 150 pounds. Her ultimate goal was to reach 100 pounds, and with another 50 pounds to go, Liberty was determined to persevere and regain her figure. When she returned to her restaurant after her jog, she was met with an unwelcome sight, her ex-husband Hank waiting for her outside. He leaned against his car, smoking a cigarette, clearly not there to see their son. Feeling frustrated, Liberty thought back to their marriage. Hank was hardly ever home, and they rarely had meaningful conversations. He had little interest in her life and dismissed her attempts to discuss household affairs. Now, after the divorce, he seemed to keep popping up in her life. Hank demanded to know where she had been and criticized her for locking the door and wasting his money. Liberty retorted that it was her money, not his, and asked him to leave her alone. He revealed that he had lost his job, blaming Liberty for taking more than half of his assets in the divorce. He accused her of being heartless and expressed regret only for not divorcing her sooner to avoid facing Zachary's retaliation. Liberty had no interest in getting back with Hank, seeing his true colors, and preferred to focus on being a single mother rather than dealing with his drama. She remained firm in her decision to move on and work towards her goals. Fuming with anger, Liberty couldn't help but smirk at Hank's accusations. She firmly denied being responsible for his job loss and told him not to blame others for his own actions. She added that she also had regrets, mainly for not divorcing him sooner, and emphasized that their divorce was the right decision for her. Hank continued to express his frustration, claiming that he would have lost his job anyway because of Zachary's interference. He accused Liberty of being wicked and deliberately involving Zachary in their divorce to harm him. Liberty refuted these claims, stating that she had no control over Serenity and Zachary's actions and that she couldn't have known about Zachary's identity from the start. Hank then brought up his sister's job loss and blamed Zachary for it, assuming that he was sticking up for Liberty. Liberty simply retorted that Zachary had every right to support her. She dared Hank to confront Zachary if he had a problem with it, but Hank knew he wouldn't have the courage to do so. Hank was in financial trouble due to the renovation of his marital home with Jessica and the demands from the Yates after their secret wedding. He needed money but was out of work. He apologized to Liberty for his harsh words and asked if he could see her remodeled restaurant. Liberty was cautious and refused to be alone with him, fearing that Jessica might accuse her of trying to seduce Hank. Liberty was unyielding in her stance, and Hank was left speechless by her strong will. The tension between them remained, and the situation seemed far from resolved. Hank had once belittled Liberty for her weight, claiming that her appearance overshadowed any other positive qualities she had. However, now that Liberty had lost a significant amount of weight and looked better than before, Hank couldn't confidently make that statement anymore. Despite their divorce, Hank still seemed to enjoy the idea of having two women fighting over him. However, Liberty had long moved on from her feelings for him, and Hank was conflicted about it. He had betrayed her, but it didn't sit well with him that she no longer cared for him. Hank approached Liberty and asked for financial help, stating that he needed money for his wedding with Jessica. He offered to repay the loan once he found a new job. Liberty refused to lend him money and called him shameless. She expressed how he had hurt the woman who once loved him unconditionally. In anger, Hank threatened to take over Liberty's restaurant, claiming he could do a better job. Liberty retaliated by splashing water on him and hitting him with a broom. Hank finally drove away, hurling insults at her. Despite Hank's hurtful words, Liberty stood her ground, knowing that her self-worth was not determined by his opinion of her. She was determined to move forward and continue building her successful life without him. Hank drove back home, fuming with anger and cursing Liberty. He felt relieved that he had divorced her and was now with Jessica, whom he considered to be sweet and kind. He couldn't stop thinking about the arguments and troubles he had with Liberty. As he reached his rented place, Hank noticed his sister's car downstairs, which irritated him even more. He knew there would be more arguments inside. Hank wondered if Zachary had a hand in his sister and brother-in-law losing their jobs as well, which made him feel guilty for dragging his sister into his problems. Inside the house, Jessica and Chelsea were arguing about their current situation. Jessica was upset as her room had been messed up by Chelsea's son, Lucas. The 4-year-old boy had played with Jessica's cosmetics and skincare products, causing a mess. Chelsea didn't seem to take it seriously, dismissing it as harmless child's play. Jessica complained to her mother about the situation, frustrated with Jessica's lack of consideration. She expressed her concerns about finding a job and the financial struggles they were facing. Chelsea, on the other hand, complained about her husband and their ongoing fights over their joblessness and financial situation. The tension in the house was evident, and Hank was caught in the middle of it all, feeling overwhelmed and troubled by the circumstances. George had a dream of starting his own construction material business, but the cost of setting it up made Chelsea hesitant. She was worried about using her savings for the venture. She feared losing her money if the business failed. Despite her concerns, Chelsea wanted her husband to pursue his dream, hoping to become a successful business owner's wife. Facing financial challenges, Chelsea turned to her family for help, including her parents and brother, just as she had done in the past. This irritated Jessica, Hank's wife, who felt bitter about the constant comparison between her and Liberty. The tension escalated when Jessica accused Lucas, Chelsea's son, of creating a mess in her room and damaging her cosmetic and skincare products. Chelsea refused to take responsibility, arguing that it was her brother who had bought those items for Jessica. The argument became heated, trading insults and getting into a physical altercation. Mr. Brown and Mrs. Brown intervened, trying to separate the two, but Hank eventually stepped in to stop the fight. Jessica tearfully complained to Hank about the damage and claimed that Chelsea had insulted her. Hank was caught in the middle of the conflict between his wife and sister. Jessica reminded him of his promise to protect her and expressed her distress over Chelsea's behavior. The situation became more complicated, and Hank had to find a way to resolve the family feud. "I regret not having a wedding reception when we got married. Your sister is causing me so much trouble. It's like she doesn't care about being a good sister-in-law," Jessica complained tearfully. Jessica had heard that the Browns had pretended to adore Liberty and her sister before Hank and Liberty's marriage. However, after Liberty gave birth, their true colors were revealed, probably thinking that Liberty wouldn't leave because of their child. Despite the difficult in-laws, Jessica admitted she had genuine feelings for Hank, which is why she married into the family. She was confident that she could handle the crazy in-laws as long as she had Hank's love and financial support. Hank comforted Jessica and then turned his anger towards Chelsea, his sister. He pointed out that Lucas, Chelsea's son, had wreaked havoc in their room and questioned why Chelsea didn't stop him. Chelsea defended herself, claiming she didn't know Lucas went into their room as she was busy cooking. Hank stood up for Jessica, saying it wasn't Lucas's fault but Chelsea's negligence for not keeping an eye on him. Chelsea blamed Hank for taking Jessica's side, but Hank argued that they were now a family, and everyone should support each other. Realizing her mistake, Chelsea agreed to replace the makeup Lucas had broken and suggested they lock their bedroom door when they go out. Hank wiped Jessica's tears and assured her that he would protect her from anyone who caused trouble in their family. Mrs. Brown remained silent, upset that Hank paid more attention to Jessica. Hank advised Jessica to ignore his sister's behavior and assured her that he would handle any problems that arose. Hank glared at his sister and scolded her for not taking responsibility for Lucas's behavior and making a mess in his room. He urged her to discipline her son and prevent such incidents in the future. When asked why she came, Chelsea explained that she and her husband were out of work and wanted to set up a construction supplies business. They asked Hank to lend them $300,000, assuring they would pay back with interest once the business succeeded. Jessica didn't look pleased but remained silent to see how Hank would respond. Hank questioned the need for such a large amount, reminding Chelsea that they had been working for over a decade and should have significant savings by now. Chelsea defended herself, claiming they hadn't earned much and had 3 children to support. Hank didn't believe her, knowing that their salaries had increased significantly over the years. He suggested she talk to Jessica about lending the money. Hank also revealed that he and Jessica had lost their jobs due to Mr. York's retaliation against them for being married to Serenity. The Browns were stunned by the news, and Chelsea looked at Jessica with surprise. She couldn't believe Hank had entrusted Jessica with full control of their finances. Jessica declined Chelsea's request for a loan, stating that they were facing financial constraints due to their upcoming wedding and house renovation, coupled with both of them losing their jobs. Jessica inferred that Chelsea had substantial savings but preferred seeking help from family rather than using her own money. Chelsea remained silent, realizing that she couldn't rely on Hank while Jessica managed their finances. She knew she wouldn't receive any financial assistance from Jessica. Meanwhile, at the Stones' residence, Serenity and Sunny arrived to meet her grandaunt, Mrs. Stone. Serenity brought 2 bags of fruits as a gesture of goodwill, knowing that Mrs. Stone enjoyed them. As they chatted, Serenity asked about Elisa's whereabouts, and Mrs. Stone expressed her concerns about Elisa's extravagant spending habits. She mentioned that Elisa might be exploring investment opportunities since she showed a keen eye for business, despite never working in an office. Mrs. Stone also inquired about Serenity's hand injury, showing her concern for her grandniece. While carrying Sunny in her arms, Mrs. Stone held Serenity's hand and expressed her concern about Serenity's reluctance to seek help or share her feelings since Zachary revealed his identity. Mrs. Stone admired Serenity and her sister for their strong-willed nature, which seemed to be inherited from her. Serenity humorously reminded Mrs. Stone that she had previously mentioned the sisters taking after her in temperament. Mrs. Stone reassured Serenity that she would always stand up for her and asked what favor she needed. Serenity requested Mrs. Stone's help to accompany her to social gatherings, as she wanted to familiarize herself with Zachary's circle and strive for their future together. Mrs. Stone gladly agreed to bring Serenity along, as her daughter Elisa was reluctant to attend such events due to her disdain for hypocritical people. Mrs. Stone advised Serenity to be cautious and prioritize benefits while mingling in social circles. She encouraged Serenity to be bold and not tolerate anyone who sought to harm her. Serenity explained that attending social gatherings with Zachary would make it difficult to discern people's true intentions, as Zachary's protective nature would deter them from offending her openly. Mrs. Stone agreed with Serenity's reasoning and warned her about the hypocrisy and xenophobia prevalent in the upper class. She emphasized the importance of adapting to this environment, especially if Serenity intended to take on a prominent role in the York family in the future. Deep within herself, Serenity pondered if there was anyone else she could spend her life with besides Zachary. However, she knew that Zachary would react strongly if she ever mentioned breaking up, so she felt compelled to blend in with his social circle. Mrs. Stone mentioned that she had received several invitations lately but had not looked at them, assuming they were not of great importance. she offered to let Serenity join her in every social gathering to gain experience. Mrs. Stone instructed Serenity to sort the invitations by date, and she would then provide details about the organizers, their businesses, wealth, family, and personalities. Mrs. Stone emphasized the importance of understanding people's personalities when getting along with them, comparing it to a battlefield where knowing one's enemies was crucial for victory. Elisa arrived and playfully interacted with Sunny. Mrs. Stone reminded her to be careful while holding him. Elisa asked Sunny if he liked her, and he responded with admiration. She jokingly declared that he would be a lady killer when he grew up, to which Sunny agreed. Elisa noticed the invitation cards and expressed her disinterest in attending such social gatherings. Mrs. Stone insisted that socializing with others was necessary for Serenity's growth. She mentioned a social gathering hosted by the Dowlings and encouraged both Serenity and Elisa to attend. Elisa refused, claiming that the Dowlings' status was lower than theirs, but Serenity explained that she had requested to attend such gatherings as a learning experience. Elisa teased Serenity about making peace with Zachary and offered to put in a good word for her with him, claiming seniority based on her relationship as Serenity's cousin. Mrs. Stone was left speechless by Elisa's response to Serenity's decision to attend social gatherings. Serenity appreciated the need to tolerate and learn as she ventured into growing a business, and Mrs. Stone wished Elisa could be as understanding. The three of them had a pleasant conversation, occasionally interrupted by Sunny's cute babbling. The maid then informed them that dinner was ready. Mrs. Stone suggested that Serenity try on Elisa's gowns to see which style suited her. She planned to buy new gowns for Serenity and teach her etiquette and social skills. Serenity agreed to the plan and wanted to become more outstanding to support Zachary without holding him back. During dinner, they learned that Alice was not feeling well and had gone for a checkup. Elisa and Serenity were concerned about her, but Mrs. Stone reassured them that regular checkups were common. As they sat at the dining table, they received news that Zachary had arrived. Mrs. Stone noted that this was the first time Zachary had visited their home. Serenity believed he felt guilty for his past actions. Mrs. Stone reassured her that Zachary had indeed fallen in love with her, and she had known him for a decade, witnessing his loyalty and lack of involvement in scandals despite his popularity. In the past, many wealthy women had crushed on Zachary, including Elisa, who openly pursued him. However, he ended up falling for Serenity, and Mrs. Stone believed it was fate. While there were many young elites in Wolfspoon, Zachary's heart belonged to Serenity. Mrs. Stone encouraged Serenity to stand firm in her decision and believed in her independence and strength. Despite the challenges they faced growing up without parents, her nieces remained positive and resilient. Serenity acknowledged Mrs. Stone's advice, and the two sisters shared a smile as they prepared to face the future with determination. Elisa continued eating, seemingly indifferent to Zachary's arrival. Her mother's gaze was fixed on her. Elisa playfully joked about not getting married yet and needing her support for few more years. She compared her situation to how Mrs. Sox treated Jasmine when Josh pursued her. Mrs. Stone and Serenity were speechless at Elisa's remarks. Finally, Serenity decided to go out to welcome Zachary. It was Zachary's first time visiting the Stones' house, and he appeared low-key, bringing Jim and some gifts. Despite the past rivalry between Zachary's York Corporation and the Stone Group, Zachary's relationship with them had softened since he revealed his true identity to Serenity. Although they were still competitors, there was a subtle understanding between them. Zachary personally visited Serenity for her sake, even though he disliked the Stones. When Serenity approached him, his demeanor softened, and he greeted her warmly. Zachary explained that he came over since he had some free time and didn't expect her to be there. Serenity knew that Zachary was keeping an eye on her movements, but she didn't confront him about it. Deep down, she understood his concern and decided not to challenge him on the matter. "You picked the perfect time to visit. We were just about to have dinner," Serenity said as she opened the gate of the villa to welcome Zachary. Zachary shamelessly joked, "I'm here to mooch off your food." Serenity playfully retorted, "I feel sorry for you then." Though Zachary acted calm, Serenity knew that when she was upset with him for lying, he silently worked to change for her sake. She felt his affectionate gaze and heard his sincere words assuring her that he would respect and support those she cared about. Serenity reminded Zachary that Elisa was also present at the house. She didn't want him to feel awkward because of Elisa's feelings for him, which Zachary had never reciprocated. Unfazed by Elisa's presence, Zachary walked into the house with Serenity. Inside, he asked her about Aunt Audrey's preferences, as he had brought some tonics as gifts. Serenity advised him to focus on following the etiquette rules rather than worry about specific preferences, as her aunt already had everything she needed. Zachary promised to do his best, and Serenity appreciated his respectful approach to her family. Thinking back to her relatives in her hometown, Serenity couldn't help but feel resentment. They had caused her trouble and exploited her. She shared some recent incidents involving her shameless relatives, the Hunts, who made public apologies only to save face, without genuine sincerity. Zachary's past retaliation had left them with nothing to lose, and they continued to cause problems for Serenity. Zachary was taken aback by the Hunts' extreme behavior. He realized the depths of their shamelessness. He understood that these troublesome individuals would only stop causing problems if they were no longer alive. Despite the tumultuous past with her relatives, Serenity expressed her happiness to have Zachary there with her and invited him to wash his hands and join them for dinner. Sunny affectionately called Zachary Uncle Zach before returning to his meal. As usual, Sunny's face was covered with rice, and the table had its fair share of rice mess. Mrs. Stone and Elisa let him handle it on his own, believing that he needed to learn how to clean up after himself. They knew that with practice, he would improve over time. Sunny would be turning 3 in a few months, so it was about time for him to learn how to eat properly. Zachary affectionately touched Sunny's head before turning his attention to Mrs. Stone and addressing her as Aunt Audrey. Mrs. Stone responded kindly and told him to start eating. The servant had already prepared the cutlery for Zachary, and after exchanging greetings with Mrs. Stone, he shifted his gaze toward Elisa. However, Elisa was too engrossed in eating and didn't react as she usually did when she saw Zachary. He playfully greeted her with a "Hi, cuz." Startled, Elisa spewed her food and began coughing. Mrs. Stone quickly offered her a glass of water to help her recover. Embarrassed, Elisa blushed, and it was the first time she forgot who she was in front of Zachary. Elisa felt even more self-conscious as she noticed Sunny's eyes fixed on her, and he even covered his bowl, worried that she might spit food into it. Zachary continued to sit calmly beside Serenity and casually addressed Elisa as his cousin, just like Serenity did. Elisa wanted to argue but couldn't find the words to refute him. Elisa playfully teased Zachary about how he had quickly surrendered and formally called her cuz despite initially being unwilling to acknowledge her as his cousin-in-law. Zachary remained silent, but his action of acknowledging her as family showed respect for Serenity's family, as he had promised. Sunny, being innocent, asked Elisa if she was going to do the spewing performance again. Elisa pinched his face gently, calling him a brat, to which Sunny insisted he wasn't one and playfully mentioned that Elisa had a strong smell, referring to her perfume. Elisa was at a loss for words but didn't take it to heart, knowing Sunny's innocent and straightforward nature. Mrs. Stone playfully teased her daughter, Elisa, about Sunny disliking her perfume and suggested they start eating without dwelling on it with a 3-year-old. Elisa confirmed that she indeed smelled the perfume and decided she wouldn't wear it anymore to save money. Serenity assured Elisa that Sunny's comment was just innocent nonsense and asked her not to take it to heart since he was still young. However, Elisa felt a bit hurt by Sunny's dislike of her scent, even though she loved him dearly. Mrs. Stone addressed Zachary politely and apologized for the ordinary dishes, which were actually grown by her in the courtyard. Zachary quickly replied that he wasn't a fussy eater and would eat everything, even though both Elisa and Mrs. Stone knew him well enough to recognize his fussiness. During the meal, Zachary was attentive to Serenity and occasionally served her and Sunny. After finishing the delicious meal, Sunny praised Mrs. Stone's cooking, comparing it to the food Serenity and Liberty cooked. Mrs. Stone warmly invited him to come over more often and even offered to pick him up whenever he wanted to visit. She extended the same invitation to Serenity and Zachary, encouraging them to visit more often. Zachary politely accepted the invitation, but he couldn't help but notice the pile of invitation cards on the coffee table. He realized that Serenity wanted to attend social gatherings with her aunt as part of her efforts to be more integrated into his world. Recognizing Serenity's efforts and determination to change and grow together with him, Zachary knew he wasn't the only one making an effort in their relationship. They were both striving for a better future together. Despite Zachary's desire to see Serenity happy and relaxed, he struggled with the thought of letting her go. He understood that Serenity was making significant changes in her life for his sake, and he felt a sense of pity for her. Although Zachary attended social gatherings occasionally, he was always ready to leave early to avoid any uncomfortable situations. He realized that his mother and aunts had grown up in wealthy families and were well matched when they married into the Yorks. This insight helped him understand Serenity's determination to fit into his world. As they walked together, Zachary expressed his willingness to learn more about her and empathize with her situation. He sympathized with her concerns about holding him back and being ridiculed. However, he assured her that his reputation in Wiltspoon was not a priority, and he accepted her background wholeheartedly. Serenity appreciated Zachary's understanding and affectionately caressed his face, affirming their unity and determination to face hardships together. She promised not to force herself into uncomfortable situations and expressed her willingness to step back if needed. Zachary firmly embraced her, assuring her that he would never let them part and expressing his commitment to her. They acknowledged their different perspectives but remained devoted to each other. Zachary playfully teased Sunny, who had been observing the interaction, and eventually left for work after bidding them farewell. Serenity continued to hold on to her determination to grow and stand by Zachary's side. She hoped to walk beside him as an equal, not someone he had to drag along. Despite the challenges ahead, they both understood the importance of unity and commitment in their relationship. "I'm going to work now," Zachary reluctantly said as he left the Stones' villa, with Serenity watching him go. Sunny, who was with Serenity, questioned her about being called a third wheel, to which Serenity assured him that Zachary was only joking and that he was a peacemaker in their relationship. Mrs. Stone asked Serenity to try on some of Elisa's clothes to see which ones suited her. Elisa generously allowed Serenity to wear her clothes, showing her genuine affection for her cousin. Serenity spent the afternoon trying on various outfits and later indulged in hair and facial treatments with her aunt and cousin. In the evening, Serenity's bookstore was bustling with students buying reference materials and stationery for school. Mrs. Lane and Jasmine were busy attending to the customers. Meanwhile, Josh arrived dressed in a white suit, holding a bouquet of flowers, but chose to help out at the bookstore instead of attending a social function. Jasmine welcomed his help, and they worked together until it was time for the students to do self-revision. During their break, Jasmine inquired about Josh's social function for the night. My boss suddenly showed mercy and attended the social function on his own. I'm quite relaxed, so I came over to pick you up after work. Let's have a meal together. I made a reservation and even ordered the dishes at Wiltspoon Hotel. Once we arrive, we can straight away have the dishes served without waiting. I've also bought 2 movie tickets. After dinner, we can watch a movie. It's rare that I have so much leisure time. Since becoming Zachary's administrative executive, Josh had been extremely busy, attending numerous social functions on his boss's behalf. But today, he was fortunate enough to have some free time to spend with Jasmine. As Jasmine was about to respond, Josh suddenly turned around and hurriedly ran out of the store. Confused, Jasmine asked Mrs. Lane why he left so suddenly. Mrs. Lane explained that Josh had noticed a crowd in the store and had gone to get the bouquet of flowers he had left in the car earlier. Mrs. Lane remarked that Josh cared deeply for Jasmine, and she felt that Jasmine was blessed to have him. However, she also expressed concern for Zachary and Serenity, who seemed to be going through a tough time due to their recent conflicts. Jasmine then asked Mrs. Lane if she thought she and Josh were well matched. Mrs. Lane responded positively, mentioning that they looked good together. Jasmine couldn't help but feel pressured by the expectations of her family and friends, who all urged her to accept Josh's love. Josh returned with a bouquet of flowers and a gift box from Tiffany. He presented the bouquet to Jasmine and then opened the box to reveal a charm bracelet. Jasmine accepted the gifts, knowing she couldn't refuse them, but also feeling the weight of the expectations and reciprocation they brought with them. Jasmine arranged for food delivery for Mrs. Lane and handed her the store key, telling her she could close up whenever she wanted after dinner. Mrs. Lane offered to keep the key as Serenity wouldn't be available for the next few days. Jasmine felt reassured and left with Josh to go to Wiltspoon Hotel for dinner. During the drive, Jasmine asked Josh about Zachary's well-being. Josh shared that Zachary had been incredibly busy, working like Superman, and many people expected Josh to advise him. However, he believed only Serenity could truly help Zachary. After Zachary met with Serenity earlier that day, he seemed to cheer up a bit, but he still worked tirelessly and had lost weight. Josh then expressed his desire for them to remain affectionate and open with each other. Jasmine teased him for buttering up her family, and he cheekily replied that it was natural. Jasmine found his shamelessness amusing, and he joked that he learned from Zachary's mistakes in handling his relationship with Serenity. When Jasmine asked if he was experienced in relationships, Josh admitted that she was the first and only girl he truly loved. He revealed that initially, he wasn't interested in her, but while investigating Serenity's background for Zachary, he learned about Jasmine and became captivated by her. Back then, Josh didn't take Jasmine seriously at all. It was during Mrs. Dawson's birthday party that he started paying attention to her and found her interesting. After going on a date with her, he realized she was his kind of person, fun-loving and gossipy. As they grew closer, the thought of marrying Jasmine crossed his mind. I'm in my 30s already, and I have enough love knowledge. Being an outsider, I can see things more clearly than Zachary and became his love consultant. But even with my help, his relationship with Serenity is still a mess, Josh reflected. Jasmine sighed, explaining that Serenity wasn't cold-hearted. The issue stemmed from Zachary concealing his identity and lying to her. However, since he allowed her to stay in her sister's house, her anger was slowly subsiding. Serenity's current concern was the vast gap between her and Zachary's lives, causing psychological stress for her future. I have my worries too, Jasmine admitted, There's a significant gap between our lives as well. Despite that, I don't feel inferior or unqualified to be with you. Jasmine had several properties for rent, and if she sold them, her assets would amount to over $100 million. She didn't want to marry into a wealthy family but wanted to find someone well-matched in terms of stability and financial status. Saren isn't inferior, she's just too rational, Josh said, understanding Serenity's situation. As they continued talking about relationships, they arrived at Wiltspoon Hotel. Josh parked the car in front of the hotel and reminded Jasmine to take the bouquet he gave her for dinner. As they hurriedly walked towards the hotel, Jasmine noticed a beautiful middle-aged woman rushing over, looking strikingly similar to Josh. "Josh?" Mrs. Buchan called out to her son, who was pulling a young girl to hurry inside and avoid her. She caught up with them and scolded Josh for not hearing her call. Turning to Jasmine with a smile, she assured her not to be intimidated and explained that she had scolded her son for running away when she called him. Josh never expected to run into his mother. Mrs. Buchan glanced at Jasmine, holding the bouquet of flowers, and realized that Josh had been holding her hand earlier. It was clear that they were acting like a couple. Jasmine greeted Mrs. Buchan and openly acknowledged that she was Josh's friend. But Mrs. Buchan playfully insisted that a female friend was known as a girlfriend, making it clear that she considered Jasmine to be Josh's girlfriend. Mrs. Buchan recalled Jasmine's name from a previous embarrassing incident where she fell asleep on the floor at Mrs. Dawson's birthday party. Jasmine confirmed that it was indeed her, and Mrs. Buchan chuckled at the memory. Mrs. Buchan asked when they started dating, noting that Josh hadn't mentioned anything when he last visited home. Josh explained that he hadn't told his family to avoid making Jasmine uncomfortable. Mrs. Buchan assured Jasmine that they were easygoing and wouldn't make things difficult for them. She invited Jasmine to visit their house with Josh. Jasmine smiled and expressed her concern of disturbing Mrs. Buchan, but Mrs. Buchan assured her that she enjoyed having her around. She led Jasmine upstairs to the private room that Josh had reserved for their meal. Once seated, Mrs. Buchan admired the charm bracelet that Josh had given to Jasmine. She then took off her own fine charm bracelet and replaced it with Jasmine's. Mrs. Buchan insisted on giving her bracelet to Jasmine as a gift, noting that it was even more valuable than Josh's gift. Jasmine felt overwhelmed by such a precious gift and wanted to return it, but Mrs. Buchan insisted that she accept it, emphasizing its value and significance. She turned to Josh for help, but he playfully supported his mother's decision, hinting that the bracelet symbolized acknowledgement as a daughter-in-law. Realizing that Mrs. Buchan had already considered her as a potential daughter-in-law, Jasmine accepted the gift with gratitude. Mrs. Buchan then asked about Jasmine's parents, indicating her intention to meet them. Jasmine realized that this meeting might be the occasion for their parents to meet. She understood why Josh had been hesitant to inform his family about their relationship. His family was eager and hopeful about their potential future together. Jasmine considered the possibility of her parents and Josh's parents discussing their nuptials if they were to meet. She told Mrs. Buchan that her parents were currently traveling for a few months. Mrs. Buchan expressed regret and suggested waiting for them to return to have a meal together. She asked if Jasmine's parents had met Josh yet, and Jasmine confirmed that they had. Jasmine mentioned that her parents assumed Josh liked her brother since he often visited and treated him to meals. Mrs. Buchan playfully assured Jasmine that Josh's affection was directed toward her. She jokingly mentioned that if he had an interest in men, he would have pursued Zachary, who is already married to Jasmine's best friend, creating a fateful connection between the two couples. However, Mrs. Buchan received an urgent call and had to leave, leaving Jasmine and Josh to continue their meal and spend time together. Jasmine found her parents to be enthusiastic about Josh but less eager than Josh's family. Her parents respected her decision and gave her time to think about it. Meanwhile, Serenity arrived at Liberty's shop with Sunny. Liberty complimented Serenity's new hairstyle and appearance, noticing the changes made by her Aunt Audrey and cousin Elisa. They chatted briefly before heading back to Liberty's place to see the clothes and shoes Serenity had bought with the help of her aunt. Serenity informed Liberty that Aunt Audrey had given her blessing to their relationship and agreed to their marriage. After closing up her sister's shop, Serenity got into the car with Liberty. She shared the good news that Alice, her cousin-in-law, was pregnant. Alice and her husband, Clive, had been trying for a child after being inspired by Serenity and Zachary's family life with Sunny. They were thrilled to discover the pregnancy and shared the news with the rest of the family. During their conversation, Liberty mentioned to Serenity that Zachary had asked her about her checkups, possibly hinting at the possibility of her being pregnant. Serenity then realized that her period was 2 days late. She decided to buy an early pregnancy test as suggested by Liberty, which could be accurate even if it was still early in the pregnancy. They stopped at a drugstore, and Serenity bought multiple pregnancy tests, feeling nervous about the possibility of being pregnant. She knew that if she was pregnant, Zachary's men would likely find out as they were monitoring her activities. She pondered whether to tell Zachary or not, but she knew he would eventually find out. Unbeknownst to Serenity, her bodyguard secretly followed her into the drugstore and quickly informed Zachary about her purchase of pregnancy tests. They saw this as good news, as it could potentially lead to the couple reconciling for the sake of the child. When Zachary received the call from the bodyguards informing him about Serenity buying pregnancy tests, he was at Wiltspoon Hotel having a meeting with a client. He tried to remain calm, but his clenched hand revealed his underlying tension. He acknowledged the information and hung up before immediately calling Callum. Callum was still working overtime at the York Corporation office, and without questioning Zachary's sudden request, he quickly made his way to the hotel. Upon arriving, he found that Zachary had already left, leaving Mr. Fletcher and his associates for Callum to handle. Kevin York had reluctantly filled in for Zachary before Callum's arrival. Meanwhile, Serenity returned to Liberty's place with her sister and her nephew. They didn't need to cook as they had already eaten. Anxious, Serenity rushed to the bathroom to take the pregnancy test. However, after opening the test, she realized that her period had started, so she didn't proceed with it. When Liberty asked about the results, Serenity explained that she didn't take the test since her period had already started. She expressed a mix of feelings, both relieved and slightly disappointed. Serenity wanted to be able to tell Zachary that she wasn't pregnant yet when he mentioned checkups again. She started to wonder if there was something wrong with her body since she and Zachary had been together for a while without any deliberate use of contraception, yet she hadn't conceived. Liberty reassured her that she gets regular medical examinations, and sometimes, it's a matter of timing and fate, and not necessarily a problem with her body. Many couples with great relationships take time to conceive, even if they've been married longer than Serenity and Zachary. You shouldn't put too much pressure on yourselves either. Stress can affect fertility. Let nature take its course. You can consider getting checked if you don't get pregnant in the next 2 years. Sometimes, couples take a while to conceive, and even after examinations, no issues are found. Some even become parents after divorcing and remarrying other partners, Liberty reassured Serenity. Serenity speculated that maybe they were coincidentally within the safe period each time they tried to conceive. Liberty thought it might simply not be the right time for them to have children yet, and there didn't seem to be any health issues with either of them. Just then, the doorbell rang, and it was Zachary at the door carrying a bag with items meant for pregnant women. He had assumed Serenity was pregnant after the bodyguards informed him about her visit to the drugstore. Liberty informed Zachary that Serenity was not pregnant, as her period had started. Zachary felt disappointed but tried to hide it. He had gotten ahead of himself with excitement and bought maternity items prematurely. Liberty comforted him, saying they were still young, and there was no need to rush. She assured him that they had time and should not worry too much. Zachary agreed, saying there was no rush, especially since they hadn't even held their wedding yet. He felt more relaxed, hoping for the possibility of becoming a father in the coming years. Zachary entered the house as Liberty stepped aside to let him in. He carried the bag of items he had bought and settled down beside Serenity, who was watching TV. Liberty excused herself and went to her room, giving the couple some privacy. Curious about the contents of the bag, Serenity opened it and was surprised to find pregnancy-related supplements. She felt touched by Zachary's thoughtfulness, but also hesitant to accept them when she wasn't even pregnant yet. However, Zachary assured her that the supplements had a long expiry date and there was no need to return them. Zachary explained that he had asked the pharmacy for recommendations and bought the supplements based on their suggestions. He couldn't help but admire Serenity's beauty with her new hairstyle, but he refrained from complimenting her out loud. Concerned for her well-being, Zachary inquired about any discomfort she might be experiencing. Serenity admitted she often felt discomfort during the first 2 days of her period, but reassured him that she was fine at the moment. Zachary offered to make her some hot cocoa, but before he could leave, he urged her not to be overly courteous with him as they were husband and wife. He wanted their interactions to be more intimate and affectionate. While Serenity was in the kitchen, she received a message from Jim, informing her that Zachary hadn't eaten yet. She decided to order some fast food for him, appreciating Jim's quick response. When Jim arrived with the food, he addressed Serenity politely as Mrs., and she thanked him for his promptness. After handing over the fast food to Serenity, Jim whispered that Zachary had been working tirelessly and forgetting to eat properly. Serenity assured him she would remind Zachary to eat regularly. Once Jim left, Serenity tried to suppress her heartache and anger. In the kitchen, she found Zachary in pain, holding his stomach against the counter. Concerned, she rushed to support him and helped him to the sofa. She asked if his stomach hurt, to which he admitted that he had been neglecting meals due to work. Serenity fetched some takeout soup and pasta, urging him to eat slowly. She planned to take him to the hospital after dinner, but Zachary resisted, saying he would be fine after eating. However, Serenity insisted they would go to the hospital, no matter what. As Zachary continued eating, Serenity prepared hot cocoa for herself. She noticed how busy he had been lately and how hard he was working to secure their future. Her anger turned into deep concern for him. She thought about how he had offered to make her the richest woman in Wiltspoon, and her heart ached for him. Silent but visibly concerned, Serenity watched Zachary closely, noticing that his pain didn't seem to ease even after eating. She decided to take him to the hospital immediately, grabbed her car keys, and urged him to come along. Zachary was nervous and kept glancing at her expression. Serenity remained firm, despite her own drink being unfinished, stating that he needed medical attention, not her. "Liberty, I'm taking Zachary back," Serenity called out to her sister's room, refraining from mentioning Zachary's illness and their hospital trip. Liberty replied from her room, expressing relief that they had at least reconciled somewhat. Downstairs, the bodyguards noticed something amiss with their boss. Zachary was accompanied by Serenity, and the bodyguards inquired about his condition. Serenity informed them that Zachary was experiencing gastric problems and asked Jim to support him into the car. Jim revealed that Zachary had been neglecting meals, leading to his current health issue. Serenity scolded Zachary for not taking care of himself and promised to seek medical treatment for him. At the hospital, the security detail decided to give the couple some privacy and returned home. After some time, Serenity and Zachary arrived back at Brinfield. Serenity prepared his prescribed medications, including 3 types of injections. Zachary obediently lay down on the sofa, knowing his wife was in no mood for objections. Serenity carefully administered the injections and arranged the vials neatly. Zachary felt nervous, knowing his fear of needles, but decided not to say anything to avoid upsetting Serenity further. Zachary reluctantly sat up, feeling forlorn as he faced the intimidating large needle Serenity held. He mustered the courage to ask if she could prepare some painkillers for afterward. Serenity glared at him and didn't respond, feeling terrified of the upcoming injection. Desperate to avoid the painful ordeal, he attempted to postpone it, but Serenity remained indifferent. She informed her sister that she would be staying overnight, and Zachary couldn't help but feel a spark of joy despite his discomfort. Serenity caught him smiling and threw a pillow at him while scolding him for neglecting his health. He assured her that he would be more mindful in the future, vowing not to worry her again. Zachary moved closer to his wife, embracing her despite her attempts to push him away. He pleaded for forgiveness, explaining how difficult it was for him not to see her. He mentioned how Nana had prevented him from seeking her out. He promised to be honest and supportive, willing to accommodate her needs instead of forcing her into his world. Serenity's gaze softened as she listened to his sincere words. In a surprising moment, she grabbed his face and playfully bit him on the lip and cheeks. After the playful bites, Serenity broke free from Zachary's embrace and sternly handed him the vial of medicine, instructing him to take it. Despite the pain from the bites, he obediently accepted the medicine, amused by his wife's tough exterior hiding her caring nature. Serenity watched as Zachary bravely endured the painful injection, and once it was done, she disposed of the syringe. Left alone, Zachary pretended to look for his wedding ring, hoping to find some pain reliever. When his wife returned, he acted as if he had found it, although he wasn't sure if she believed him. Later, he sneaked into the kitchen and took some cough syrup for pain relief, as he detested needles. However, Serenity caught him in the act, and he confessed honestly. She assured him that she would get the doctor to prescribe more medicine to aid his recovery. Zachary playfully followed Serenity to her room, insisting he would sleep wherever she slept. Despite her initial resistance, he won her over with his affection and managed to spend the night in her room, finding comfort in her presence. The next morning, Serenity prepared breakfast for Zachary, showing through her actions that she was no longer angry with him. His breakfast consisted of pumpkin oat porridge. She had deliberately prepared a variety of delicious food for her breakfast, teasing Zachary to make him drool. "I'm going to have dinner with my aunt tonight, so I won't be eating with you. If you're not going to the hotel, I've prepared dinner in the shop. You can ask Jim to pick it up," Serenity informed the man sitting across from her, enjoying her nutritious meal. "Should I come with you? Which family is hosting the dinner you're attending?" "No need, Aunt Audrey is bringing Elisa and me. As for which family, I've forgotten. There were too many invitations, I can't remember them all," Zachary replied regretfully. "I won't worry if your aunt and cousin are with you. Then I'll work overtime. Just have Jim send the food over to me," he said, appreciating that his wife was willing to cook for him. "You can work overtime, but not too late. I'll be back before 11 p.m. If I don't find you at home, I'm locking the door. You can spend the night outside, I won't open it for you, Serenity declared. Zachary laughed, promising to be home when she returned. He playfully called himself hers and expressed his devotion. After a fulfilling breakfast, Serenity prepared to leave but returned briefly to ensure he took his medication. She then left for real. Nana, their revered elder, appeared unexpectedly with boxes, claiming to have been chased out and seeking to stay with them. Nana, if you want to stay, just tell Zachary, and he'll arrange everything. No need for excuses, Serenity said with a helpless laugh. The elderly woman held a revered position within the family, making it unthinkable for anyone to dare chase her out. However, she was innocent enough to believe the excuse that she had argued with her son and daughter-in-law, which led her to seek refuge with her grandson. There's no point in telling him. I had to tell you directly, he said that at home, your words carry weight. Saren, you don't hate Nana, do you? Nana, I'd be delighted for you to stay with us. Why would I hate you? Who brought you here? Nana replied, I took an Uber to avoid any confrontation with your grandfather and the others. I've lived for so long, but it's the first time I've encountered someone more shameless than myself. Serenity's expression grew somber, and her gaze turned cold. Have they bothered you? Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my YouTube channels, The Voice channel, and watch my original creations, as well as my new channel La Novela Devotion showcasing the forbidden love story. Please don't forget to hit all from the notification bell, so you will get notified whenever a new video is uploaded. Thank you.